You make us smarter, of course, on how we should look at the variants and the vaccinations. Now, today, the share price of Moderna also at a record high, as Moderna says that it is efficient against all of these variants. What can you tell us about how worried you are about the Delta variant really ripping through our economies?
Well, Francine, thanks for having me. The Delta variant is part of a series of mutations that the virus is presenting as it tries to escape the human system trying to fight it back. And it's a natural process, but it is concerning in the sense that we don't really know where these variants are going to go, and we have to stay vigilant. What we are doing on the vaccine side is to test all known variants against the vaccine and the immune response that we see to the vaccine. And indeed, yesterday, we presented data that indicates that at least the Delta variant is covered. But we do have to be very, very careful because we just can't anticipate fully what's next, and we have to keep testing and, if needed, adjusting the vaccines over time to be able to also protect against new threats.
Noubar, is there a mix that right now works even better than some of the trials we've had on? So if you have an old school vaccination for your first shot and then a second one that's mRNA, does that give you more protection?
I have to be careful because I know that throughout the world, lots of people are experimenting with this by virtue of guidance that's being issued, warning against some vaccines, and so people are basically switching to take another one. There aren't controlled studies yet that adequately prove out that that is a way to go. Empirically, kind of anecdotally, it seems as though a second shot with the mRNA is providing a boost of the immune system, in some cases significant. And so I think we're doing the studies. The health authorities are doing studies. But definitely, it is the case that a second booster shot, regardless, will be important because we really do need to protect not against just the parent initial strains, but also the variants, as were mentioned. And these variants are generally appearing because they have some advantage over the previous ones. And so continued vigilance, continuous testing, and definitely we need to get definitive answers to these.
Are we vigilant enough also for people that have been double vaccinated? So what do we know about how we could actually still pass on, COVID-19, even if we've been vaccinated twice?
Well, that's another interesting frontier that's emerging because a lot of data is being gathered now about how durable our immune response is. I think your audience will have seen a couple of days ago, there were reports of some encouraging kind of durability data in terms of how our immune systems are continuing to make B cells that are essentially continuing to survey and to be able to counteract antigens or the virus, let's say. So on the one hand, we're studying that, but on the other hand, we are seeing reports coming out of antibody levels diminishing over time. And what's not clear is how much of a diminution in that level will expose us to the variants, let alone to the parent strain, and over what period of time. So it really is a complex picture. We want to make it very simple because obviously, in any way you look at it, getting vaccinated, getting protected is the right thing to do. But then as we go to the next few months or even year, we're going to have to start doing additional measurements, perhaps even in people, to make sure that we have a handle on who might be the most vulnerable and who might need an additional booster shot. Again, early to tell, studies being done, but I definitely think we can't just put our guards down.
So bottom line is, if you get both shots after a couple of weeks, you're extremely unlikely to catch it. So you're extremely unlikely to pass it on as well. Anything's possible, of course. But you're saying we may need a booster eventually to keep that high level of efficacy against alpha, beta, delta, what have you.
And many others, epsilons and others that are coming down the path. That's exactly right. And I think what we need to do, though, taking lessons from the last year and a half, is that we cannot go back into a reactive mode. We've been gaining an advantage over this virus that really is kind of gunning for our immune system constantly by being proactive, by being preventive, not just reactive. And I think we can't get to a point where we wait for another set of variants to really do damage and then start saying, okay, now what do we do? We can't afford the last year and a half all over again.
I wonder about the evolution of this virus. In the past, when we look at historic examples like the Spanish flu, these viruses eventually become less fatal and turn into what we now know of as, the flu, which most people have gotten and very, relatively few people die from. Is that likely to happen with this COVID virus, or is it possible that it mutates into something even more fatal?
Well, if it mutates into anything more dangerous, we will certainly counteract it with vaccines that are more specific continuously until it ends up in the fate that you're describing, which is most likely that enough variants make it out there that they persist, but at a kind of a containable way, say an endemic version of the virus. And that is while it's still speculation, that is the expectation that we most hear by folks that are experts in these kinds of evolutionary trajectories. So, but in fact, it could along the way get spikes of things that concern us, and we need to be able to react to them. The good news is that the mRNA technology is poised to be able to react. It's not as though if something really bad starts appearing, it's going to have to take us years and years to react. We showed already we could do this in months. We could do it again, even in a shorter period of time, if we all stay vigilant and coordinated.
Noubar, I'm in the fortunate position of being fully vaccinated, as are Matt and Francine, and we all live in developed Western countries. The picture is very different in much of the developing world. Before we start talking about giving booster shots to those in the West, should we be more focused on making sure everyone in the other parts of the world that are less fortunate actually can get inoculated first?
I think we should do both. I think we can do both, and I think it's going to require a lot of coordination and collaboration. One of the things that we saw last year was that there was a huge amount of disorganization as to what the needs were, who was willing to commit to being able to secure supplies until it was way too late. At some point, the supplies that Moderna could produce, Pfizer, others, were far exceeded by emergency demand. And at that point, there's not much you can do about it. What you can do is to, in advance, plan. Next year, we expect billions, probably north of 10 billion doses of vaccine being produced. How we deploy that certainly is up to the health authorities and the governments to coordinate. But I absolutely am in the camp of those who recognize that just by taking care of this in a few locations in the developed world will not adequately deal with this threat. So we really do need to, as we are seeing the US, EU, other countries step in, help provide supplies in a timely way. And as we ramp up even more, do so even more. We entered into a relationship with COVAX a month ago. We're looking to expand that over the next few months. We'll do our part. Moderna will produce 3 billion doses next year. But it's all about getting ahead of this as opposed to reacting, including with demand, with supply coordination.